Vance, I'm so glad that you were so close to the front because in order to prepare for this panel, I leapt to the future, WILD10, and I asked the Congress attendees in a crowdsourced manner to send us some postcards from the future about how digital technologies are playing a role in their lives as wilderness advocates. This person writes, I've organized 30 TEDx events in the Western US, and my 300 speakers have been viewed by 100,000 people from 123 countries. Also, this person also organized the first wilderness-based TEDx event that was viewed virtually in live stream all over the world, projected from the Masai Mara. Another person writes, I'm a top 20 photographer who captures the wild spirits in cities. I've resided in the dozen largest cities in America. Another person writes, my twin sister and I have eradicated all invasive plants in the hills surrounding Seattle in the past years by having fun with elementary kids, and are now famous puppets called Piper and Sean. We love laughing while pulling weeds. I'm a conservation rapper who's been a sold-out world tour with Asher J and other conservation artists to stop invasive mining in indigenous communities. The UN has just passed a resolution calling for the legalization of any mining with community of indigenous tribes. Andrew Vester writes that his wildlands team in South Africa has just established blanket coverage throughout national parks for rhino protection 24/7 with network coverage using very inexpensive radio frequency coverage. Adam Andis tells us that he's established the first digital citizen-initiated wilderness proposal, which was a crowdsourced petition. A digital community forum submitted ideas to that. Kevin Hood established with him a comprehensive wilderness stewards registry volunteer database, which is like Match.com except for wilderness volunteers. And Addie Davis, the youngest elected congressperson to Alaska following Iceland's example of 2012, they wikified their entire national constitution. She has wikified the Farm Bill and is anticipating major food system reform. And also Adam Andis has commented that this means lots of wild salmon in schools all across America. So this is just to give an idea of how creative people can be when you pull off of their ideas and especially their visions of the future. We spend a lot of time thinking about our present day work, but most of our time is spent analytically located in the present and the current task at hand and the problems that we frame ourselves. And things are changing very rapidly, and so I thought I'd stimulate the conversation a little bit by thinking about what the future looks like at this point. I think every one of us, at a certain point, we reach the limits of our discipline, and at that point, we must take a leap. And this presentation has benefited a great deal from all of the organizations listed here. I'll speak especially from my time spent on sabbatical last year at Oxford University at the Smith School for Enterprise and Environment, with a great deal of support from each one of the groups here. In particular, that effort was meant to address a big gap that we noticed working on the United Nations Global Environment Outlook. It was a survey involving more than 500 scientists to assess the status of the environment, and we found that of 90 signed and ratified agreed upon international goals, we've made progress on only 4. And so as a result, that leads us to address a very large gap for the future, and many of the scientists found ourselves at odds to envision what the future looks like that is actually realistic. Many of us thought that technology played a big role, but of course at that point with this document, because we can only rely on peer-reviewed scientific literature, there was very little digital information to rely upon. At the same time, we know that digital futures are changing a great deal very rapidly. And so we need to bring our information systems and our approach to research and development up to speed to deal with that. This is an image from Kate Rayworth, a colleague and friend of mine from Oxford University, describing donut economics. Many of us know about the planetary limits paper by Rockstrom et al. In Science, and that are the different elements there listed on the outside of the circle. but at the same time, there is no sustainability without justice. And so as a result, the inside circle there is illustrating all of the different elements that must also be taken care of in order to sustain humanity in the present time. And that at the same time, the challenges that are listed on the right can also be achieved by very small steps. So that is to say, in order to address the 21% of the world's population living in abject poverty, it would only take 0.5% of global income in order to bring that group out of really desperate need. And this is a really basic need that also affects our ability to achieve wilderness goals, which is why I'm bringing it into the conversation. A second point has to do with the way in which we're talking about leapfrogging. Leapfrogging often involves technology that leaps underdeveloped countries into more developed status, so that is to say moving to the right of that vertical line. But at the same time, trends in the past have moved us above this blue horizontal line, which is planetary limits. So leapfrogging in this sense means engagement of digital technologies to base quality of life also on things that are universal, that can easily be found also in developing countries, and to use digital technologies to engage with empathy, also understanding, and a way of human beingness that allows us to increase needs and satisfaction without also increasing our material footprint. This is a diagram from a visioning exercise that I did with a group in Alaska, and I'm sure we are all concerned about the trends that children oftentimes, when asked about the future, the first thing that they list, as they did in Alaska: fast food, cell phones, a lot of things that are very technologically and gadget-oriented that maybe don't reflect the things that we would hope most for them. But if we look closer, and maybe this is a way to bring some of those visions down to earth, it's not just about the technological gadgetry. Technology also involves the processes and the norms that we engage that gadgetry in order to meet our needs and wants. So looking more closely at the text here, what this child is describing is a want to talk to each other more. So we can ratchet down from the technological desires to shared goals. And my explorations here were inspired also by crowdsourcing. When I was working on the GEO, I was also working on the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity for United Nations Environment Program Green Economy Initiative. And at this point, I didn't know much about social media, but as we began to use social media to broadcast out messages, what we found was that people all around the world were translating messages and also transmitting back to us the things that mattered most, and the ways in which they found that groups in organizations that maybe had more power and resources were not reflecting their needs, their values, or even their understanding of what mattered and what did not. And so as a result, it offers us a chance to engage in very deep listening, and as a result, modify our measures, our ways of explaining, our ways of incorporating new insights into the way in which we proceed with science. So thinking about what's needed, this graphic was shown yesterday. I think for me it illustrates a rising global consciousness, which I will argue is necessary to achieving our successes for Millennium Ecosystem Development Goals, as well as meeting the constraints of living on a finite planet. And what's needed here is not only shared consciousness, but a shared awareness of goals. When we think about big data planning and organization, it means tapping into those systems that did not exist even 10 years ago and envisioning what it looks like to work with large information systems that are growing bigger every day. And the public-private innovation that's involved in making that happen is something really important, and that we have accurate progress indicators to show us repeatedly whether or not we're getting closer to our goals, because currently we don't have that kind of feedback in information systems. But we can imagine that developing, and in order to imagine that developing, we need to engage our best minds, no matter where they are, developed countries, developing countries, people with scientific degrees, people not, all oriented around developing a targeted strategy for research and development. And that's really important to think about doing right now, because at this point we are in a time, what I'm calling the Petabyte Planet. And the reason why I'm calling it that is because we can all imagine the time when we struggled to carry around a megabyte of data and how excited we were to get our first data stick with the gigabyte on it. Now we have hard drives with terabytes. How long do you think it's going to be before we have a petabyte of data? Maybe stored at home, or maybe even in our wristwatches. And what the heck are we going to do with all that information? So our information systems and the way we draw off of them are very oriented toward, just going back here, that orange disk there, 80%, used to be phone voice analog. So our understanding of what we do with these mobile devices is very tied to our idea in the 1980s of what a telephone was. Yet in the very near future, we are all carrying around microprocessors that will be embedded on the edge of our eyeglasses. How is it possible then that we can bring along information that is also linked to our understanding of wilderness, the ideas that wilderness carry along with it, the information it gives us, the experiences, the emotion, and so on? And I'd suggest that our group needs to think very strategically about how that happens and to have a time of brainstorming so that we can achieve that. Because 90% of data that's in current existence was created in just the past 2 years, and that means that by the time of the next WILD, in WILD11, we will have 50 billion mobile devices worldwide, and far more than people on the planet or even houses with sanitation. And so if we think about the challenge that we used to have about printing up a price tag on an item and making market decisions. The reason why I find this so insightful in terms of why this is creating a driver for disruptive market technology is because at this point, on average, we're exchanging the rate of about 6 newspapers per person per day. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean meaningful information. This is like cat videos uploaded on YouTube and things like that. However, we can make that information more meaningful, and in years to come, we're going to have increasingly more to work with. So to take a strategic perspective, this was a diagram for the GEO that we wrote on, feeding off of Donnella Meadows' essay Leverage Points for Change, talking about the ways in which we might imagine working on the superficial surfaces of things, creating feedbacks and information flows, changing the structure of items in terms of rules and incentives, and then also shifting mindsets. So when I'm looking at the way in which digital and mobile technologies will influence the future, I've been organizing along these 3 different lines, looking for technologies that are doing these things. Most of our growth right now in mobile phone subscriptions are occurring in the developing world at a rate of about 3 to 1. Africa leads the world in those who use mobile money. About 70% of residents in Kenya are currently doing that. And this is very significant, especially in areas of rural development, those very close to wilderness areas. You can imagine what it's like if you have to carry your produce to market and that takes 3 days to get to market. You are forced to accept the payment that is available at the marketplace at that point in time. Now with mobile devices, there's much more coordination in the products that are being offered and also the market purchases, and also our ability to incentivize products that have attributes that we desire attached to them. So here is an illustration in kind of circular pattern. Lower left-hand corner is what you would see if you were to buy a door and trying to decide whether or not it would be desirable to spend the extra bucks to get the forest certification symbol on there. But with a QR code, it's possible now to tap in and have a video arrive to your personal mobile device, which also it may connect to a piece of information like a digital genetic barcode on the log in the place that it was harvested, and that transported all the way to the point of production. You might even see in the future a video of the family that those harvesting purchases affect. So there's lots of point of purchase applications. This is Seafood Watch from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. The trend of documented trust and the mesh economy is really important right now in mobile and digital media. Applications that are tapping into identification and lowering the fear barrier of not really knowing what's out there are very popular, as well as using technologies like geocache to encourage children and others to get out in environments that are otherwise less familiar. The Palm Bomb there on the right is a crowdsourcing activity. And there's virtual experiences and tracking and monitoring which can occur with digital devices. All of these technologies to say I'm not advocating wholeheartedly for technology, but as so many of our prior presenters today pointed out, much of the advance of this is inevitable. And so what I'm advocating for here is the active engagement of all of you in driving more of the development of these different technologies. MatterNet is a vision of being able to monitor very remote places using drones. This may also be useful for discouraging poaching virtual experiences. Augmented reality, where you have a device that allows you to envision what rewilding might look like or what an area once looked like long ago. Decision theater, this is at UBC and Arizona State University. There's now mobile theaters that basically create a surround venue that allows citizen decision makers to engage with a simulation module and also using either a mobile phone device or a clicker weigh in on those changes that they like or they don't like, and that information can be categorized by demographic. Information about neighbor behavior is very evocative, competing against those that are right next door to you about energy use, or things like this is slavery footprint, which tells you how many people that are working under substandard labor conditions are supporting your current lifestyle. And as I was saying earlier, all of these different approaches mean that not only do we need to think about competing and making our decisions based on our nearest neighbor, but also how close we are to collective goals. You can imagine how challenging it is to be at the climate negotiating table and basing your bet based on what you think the neighbor is doing, but without any sense at all as to whether or not the whole negotiating table is actually anywhere near its goal. So this is an app that was developed by C Roads, and it's Climate Pathways. It's a real-time simulator for negotiation. Budge is a way to, if someone makes a bet with you that they'll be able to give up something and you say, okay, that's fine, I'll donate some $10 to our favorite wilderness charity and hold them accountable using this app. Or instead, you say, I'm going to give up caffeine this month, and your cell phone budges you at the point of purchase to say, wouldn't you really donate that, rather donate that $3 to your favorite charity instead of drinking the caffeine that you said you were going to give up? So crowdsourcing, and I'm just on my last two slides here, both in terms of apps development and the narrative of who is telling the story and how important that is. So we see the differences in mobile technology emerging at all of these different scales, whether it's how we are engaging ourselves with nature, engaging with others, or coordinating among actors, both market and experiential, and then how we're tracking information. But it involves a lot of information also about how broad-scale trends are emerging in terms of trade, agreement, and protections. These are the 10 trends that I'm noticing in terms of data and new media mobile technology that I believe to be particularly useful and applicable to wilderness needs in the future and creating a sustainable green economy. So things like being able to sense planetary limits and getting real-time feedback, engaging and identifying with the experience of others, even those very far geographically removed. The ability to transmit and engage in processes involving empathy, the process of visualizing footprints, seeing the past and the future, the ability to document and transact economically on trust that may be following you around digitally. the process of being able to team up, crowdsource, and also bringing down the cost of failure so that we can all experiment a bit more and also grow hope. So thanks very much for your time.